There are some stories that find you at the right time. This is one of them. It is a simple tale, really about a man who had given up on tomorrow and a woman who refused to let him, set in the Arizona territory, somewhere in the early 1880s, when the frontier was still wild enough to swallow a person whole and quiet enough to make loneliness feel like a living thing. If you have ever loved someone and lost them, you will recognize Caleb Wright. If you have ever felt too old to start again, too tired to hope, you will understand why he built his cabin with one chair, one plate, one cup. But the West has a way of sending us what we need, not what we expect. This story is for those who believe it is never too late. For those who know that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is simply stay. The deer stood 40 yards out, broadside, still as a photograph. Caleb Wright pressed his cheek to the stock of the sharps, the walnut worn smooth against his skin from years of use. Clean shot, easy kill, meat for 2 weeks, maybe 3 if he salted it right. His finger rested on the trigger. The buck turned its head, ears swiveling towards some sound Caleb could not hear. Black eyes caught the late afternoon light. For a moment, neither of them moved the hunter and the hunted, frozen in that old, ancient arithmetic that men and animals have known since the beginning of time. Caleb exhaled, lowered the rifle. The deer bounded into the scrub oak and was gone, white tail flashing once before the brush swallowed it whole. He stood there a long while after, the rifle heavy in his hands, watching the empty space where the animal had been. 47 years old, and he could not rightly say why he had let it go. His stomach was not full. His smokehouse was not stocked. Winter would come, whether he was ready or not, same as it always did. But something in him had stopped caring much about winter. He walked home, empty-handed, boots crunching through the dry grass, the canyon walls rising orange and red on either side like the walls of some great cathedral. His shadow stretched long and thin ahead of him, pointing the way back to the cabin like a finger he did not particularly want to follow. The smell of sage and dust filled his nose. Somewhere up in the rocks, a canyon wren sang its tumbling song, each note falling lower than the last. Margaret used to say that birds sounded like water running downhill. He had not thought of that in years. The cabin sat where he had built it, 11 years ago, one room. Plank walls chinked with mud, a chimney that smoked something fierce when the wind blew wrong. He had meant to fix that chimney. He had meant to do a lot of things. Inside, the coal oil lamp sat on the table, its glass chimney cracked down one side. The smell of old kerosene and wood smoke hung in the air, familiar as his own skin. The letter from his sister lay beside the lamp, still sealed. 6 months of silence pressed flat in an envelope, going yellow at the edges. He knew what it said without opening it. Same thing every letter said. Come home. Caleb, come home before there is nothing left of you to come home to. He set the rifle above the door. In its place on the wooden pegs, he had carved that first winter. Dust on the barrel. He used to clean it every Sunday after church, back when Sundays meant something. Back when Margaret would hum hymns while she cooked supper, and the cabin smelled of biscuits and bacon and something like hope. The fire took 3 matches to catch. His hands were not as steady as they used to be. He made coffee in the tin pot, the one with the dent in the side from when he dropped it crossing the Gila River in '69, and poured it into the same cup he had used every morning for 11 years. The cup Margaret had bought him in Tucson, the one with the chip on the rim that he could feel against his lip every time he drank. The coffee was bitter. He had made it too strong again. Margaret always said he made coffee that could wake the dead and put them back to sleep angry. He drank it standing up because sitting down felt like giving in to something he could not name. Outside, dusk was settling over the canyon, the sky going from blue to purple to that deep red that only happened in October, when the dust hung just right in the air. The evening star had come out, bright and steady over the eastern ridge. Starlight, star bright, Margaret used to say. First star I see tonight. He never did find out what she wished for. Caleb stepped onto the porch and looked at the trail. It wound down through the junipers and disappeared around a red rock outcrop, heading east toward Tucson, toward people, toward the world he had walked away from when the cholera took Margaret in 3 days flat, 3 days from healthy and laughing to gone forever. Her hand growing cold in his, while he sat there not believing it, not accepting it, not understanding how a God who was supposed to be merciful could take the only good thing he had ever had, 40 miles of dust and silence between him and anything that resembled a life. He looked at that trail the way a man looks at a letter he knows he ought to open but cannot bring himself to touch. Then he saw her, a figure at the tree line, motionless, watching. Caleb's hand moved toward the door, toward the rifle, then stopped. He squinted against the fading light, trying to make sense of the shape. Too small for a man, too still for an animal. A woman. She stood at the edge of the pines, maybe 60 yards out, her dress a faded blur against the dark trees, not hiding, not approaching, just standing there, patient as stone, like she was waiting for something, for permission, maybe, or for him to make the first move. Caleb did not move. The minutes stretched out. The sky turned from purple to black. The first stars pricked through the darkness, one by one, the way they had every night for 11 years, while he sat on this porch and watched them and felt nothing at all. And still she stood there. And still he watched, and neither of them spoke. Finally, he went inside, got the water bucket, the old oak one with the rope handle Margaret had braided herself, walked to the well and drew it up, the rope rough against his palms, the pulley squeaking the way it always did when he turned around. She was closer 30 yards now, stopped at the fence line he had mended last spring when he had nothing better to do with his hands. She was younger than he had thought, 30, maybe 35, dark hair pulled back from a face that held no expression he could read, a face that had learned long ago not to show what it was feeling. She wore Anglo clothes, a calico dress too big in the shoulders, the hem dragging in the dirt, faded from what might have been blue to a gray that matched the twilight, clothes that did not belong to her, clothes that had belonged to someone else, someone taller, someone broader. Apache. He knew it before she spoke a word. Something in the way she held herself, the stillness of her, the patience that came from generations of waiting and watching and surviving in a land that did not forgive mistakes. "Water," she said. Her voice was low, careful, each word placed like a stone across a creek, deliberate, tested, sure of its footing before moving to the next. "Please." Caleb looked at her for a long moment, at the dust on her dress, at the weariness in her shoulders, at the way her hands hung at her sides, open and empty, showing him she meant no harm. Then he dipped the ladle into the bucket and held it out. She came forward slowly, the way you approach a horse that might spook, and took the ladle in both hands, drank deep. Water ran down her chin, and she did not bother to wipe it away. Her hands trembled. Not from cold. The evening was warm. The way October evenings were in this country, holding on to summer's heat like a miser holding on to his last coin. The trembling came from somewhere else, from the effort of not trembling. She gripped the ladle tighter, steadying herself. And Caleb saw it all in that small movement, the exhaustion, the hunger, the miles behind her and the miles still ahead, and something else too, something harder to name, fear, maybe, or the ghost of it, the shadow it leaves behind when you have been afraid for so long that fear becomes just another part of breathing. He did not ask where she had come from, did not ask where she was going, did not ask any of the questions that a sensible man would ask a stranger showing up at his fence line at dusk. He just refilled the ladle and held it out again. She drank, set the ladle down on the fence post, looked at him with eyes that expected nothing and asked for less. "Where's the nearest town?" she asked. "Tucson. 40 miles east." She nodded, turned toward the trail. "There is a dry corner in the barn," Caleb heard himself say. The words came out before he knew he was going to speak them, rising up from some place he thought had gone silent years ago. One night, she stopped. Did not turn around. Her back was straight, her shoulders set. But something in the way she held herself shifted a loosening, maybe, or a tightening. He could not tell which. "One night," he said again. And he did not know why he was saying it, did not know why his chest felt tight, did not know anything except that the thought of her walking into that darkness alone made something twist inside him that he thought had died with Margaret and been buried in the same grave. The woman turned, looked at him, looked at the barn, looked back at him with those dark eyes that gave away nothing. "One night," she said, and walked toward the barn without another word, her bare feet making no sound on the hard, packed dirt. Caleb stood on the porch until the stars came out thick and bright, the Milky Way spilling across the sky like flour from a torn sack. The empty ladle was still in his hand. The coffee had gone cold in the pot. The coal oil lamp flickered and sputtered and finally died, leaving him in darkness. He did not go inside to fix it. Somewhere in the barn, a woman he did not know was sleeping in the corner he had offered her. And for the first time in 11 years, Caleb Wright was not alone on his land. He did not know what to make of that. He did not know what to make of any of it. But standing there in the dark, with the smell of sage on the wind, and the stars wheeling overhead, and the silence of the canyon pressing in on all sides. He felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt like tomorrow might be different from today, and that scared him more than he wanted to admit. If this canyon feels familiar, if you have ever stood at a crossroad and chosen the harder path, I would be honored to know where you are reading from tonight. As the old folks used to say, a story shared is a burden halved. The rooster had not crowed yet when Caleb opened his eyes. Gray light seeped through the window, the kind that came before dawn, when the world was still deciding whether to wake up or stay asleep a while longer. He lay still on the cot, listening. The wool blanket scratched against his chin. The cabin smelled of cold ash and last night's coffee. Something was different. He could not name it at first. Then he realized the horse was not stamping every morning for 3 years. That bay mare kicked at her stall door until he came with the feed bucket. She was a creature of habit. Same as him, impatient and hungry and unwilling to wait for the sun to rise before making her complaints known. Silence. Caleb swung his legs off the cot, feet finding the cold plank floor. The boards creaked under his weight. He pulled on his boots without lacing them, grabbed his jacket from the nail by the door, the canvas one with the torn pocket he kept meaning to mend, and stepped outside. The air was cool and sharp, carrying the smell of juniper and damp earth. Frost sparkled on the fence rails. His breath made small clouds that hung in the stillness before fading away. The barn door stood open. A wedge of gray light fell across the dirt floor inside. Caleb walked toward it, his unlaced boots scuffing against the hard-packed ground. The mare stood quiet in her stall, her nose buried in a full feed trough. Fresh hay, water bucket topped off. No scum floating on the surface like there usually was by morning. The horse lifted her head and looked at him with calm, satisfied eyes, then went back to eating. Caleb had not done this. He walked the perimeter of the barn, his eyes adjusting to the dimness. Straw rustled under his feet. The smell of horse and hay and old leather filled his nose, familiar and warm. Nothing was missing. Nothing was disturbed. Just the work, done before he woke, done quiet and careful by hands that knew what they were doing. Movement at the fence line. Ayanna knelt in the dirt near the south corner, where 2 rails had come loose last month and he had not gotten around to fixing. She did not look up as he approached. Her hands moved steady and sure, weaving wire around the split wood, pulling it tight with a strength that surprised him. Caleb stopped 10 feet away. His shadow fell across her. "I didn't ask you to do that. You didn't ask me not to." She still did not look up. The wire bit into her palm as she twisted it, leaving a thin red line against the brown of her skin. She did not seem to notice or care. He watched her work. Her shoulders moved beneath the too big calico dress, muscle and bone doing what muscle and bone had done 1,000 times before. This was not the first fence she had mended, not the first barn she had worked, not the first morning she had risen before dawn to make herself useful to someone who had not asked for her help. "One night," he said. That was the deal. Ayanna tied off the wire with a quick twist of her wrist, stood, brushed the red dirt from her knees, the dust rising in a small cloud that caught the early light. "Sun's not up yet." She looked at him for the first time that morning. Her eyes held nothing, no plea, no challenge, No expectation, just a flat, patient waiting. Like she had done this before too. This standing and waiting for a man to decide her fate. I can be gone before it clears the ridge, if that's what you want. Caleb looked at the fence, at the barn, at the mare standing quiet and fed behind him, content in a way she had not been in months. Then his eyes caught something at her collar, where the calico gaped open at the neck. A small leather pouch hung from a rawhide cord, half hidden against her collarbone, and beside it, folded tight and pressed flat against her skin, barely visible in the gray morning light, the edge of a document. Official paper. He could see the texture of it, the weight of it. Different from ordinary writing paper. A territorial seal, dark against the cream-colored edge. His jaw tightened. "What's that?" he asked. Ayanna's hand moved to her collar, fingers closing over the hidden paper. "Nothing. Don't lie to me." Caleb kept his voice even, but his eyes did not leave her hand. "Not if you want to stay another hour?" The canyon was silent. The frost on the fence rails had begun to melt, small drops of water catching the first light. Somewhere in the pines. A jay screamed once and went quiet, like it knew better than to interrupt. Ayanna stood motionless for a long moment. Her breath made small clouds in the cold air. Then her fingers uncurled. She reached beneath the calico and pulled out the folded document, holding it toward him the way a person holds something that burns. Caleb took it. The paper was soft with handling, creased and recreased until the folds had worn thin as old cloth. It smelled faintly of sweat and sage and something else fear. Maybe, or the memory of it. He opened it carefully, tilting it toward the gray morning light. His stomach turned before he finished the first line. Bill of sale, territory of Arizona. This document certifies the transfer of one Apache female, approximately 30 years of age, from the San Carlos Indian Agency to Mr. Garrett Slade of Tucson, in exchange for the sum of $40 and sundry goods. $40, sundry goods. Caleb read it again. The words did not change. The territorial seal sat at the bottom, dark and official, stamped by someone who had probably not thought twice about what they were doing. "He bought you." His voice came out flat, scraped hollow. "Like livestock. Legal." Ayanna's jaw was tight, the cords of her neck standing out beneath the skin. Reservation agent signed it, territorial stamp, everything proper. Proper? The word tasted like copper in his mouth. Slade wanted an Apache wife, for show, something to parade around Tucson, make himself look important to the other traders. She was not looking at him now. Her eyes fixed on some middle distance, somewhere past the fence, past the canyon walls, past anything he could see. The ceremony was set for a Thursday morning. I left Wednesday night. Caleb looked down at the paper in his hands. The signature at the bottom was illegible, a careless scrawl made by a hand that had signed 100 such documents and would sign 100 more. The territorial seal was smudged, but visible, the state's blessing on a transaction that should have made any decent man sick. "This is why you're running." "He doesn't think I'm running." Her voice hardened. "He thinks I'm stolen property, something that belongs to him that got loose." The sun crested the eastern ridge. Orange light spilled down the canyon walls, turning the red rock to fire. The frost vanished from the fence rails. The jay started screaming again in the pines. Ayana's face remained in shadow, her expression unreadable. Caleb folded the paper, held it out to her. She did not take it. "You should burn that," he said. "Can't." She finally looked at him, and something flickered in her eyes. Not hope, not quite, but something close to it. "It's the only proof of what he did. If I burn it, it's my word against his, and we both know whose word counts out here." Caleb's hand dropped to his side. The paper still pinched between his fingers. She was right. He knew she was right. An Apache woman's testimony against a white trader with legal documents and a territorial seal. No judge west of the Mississippi would even let her speak. "How long since you left?" 19 days. "He's looking for you." He never stopped. Caleb turned and walked toward the cabin. His boots felt heavy on the hard-packed dirt. He did not look back to see if she followed. The screen door banged behind him as he pushed through into the dim interior, moving straight to the cold hearth. The second chair sat in the corner, covered with a horse blanket he had thrown over it years ago. Dust motes swirled in the shaft of light from the window as he pulled the blanket off. The pine was rough beneath his hands, the joints still tight despite the years of disuse. Margaret's chair, he had made it for her the first winter, when she complained about sitting on barrels while she sewed. Cut the wood himself from a pine that had fallen in the canyon. Shaped it with hand tools by lamplight while she slept. She had laughed when he presented it, that full, warm laugh that came from deep in her chest, and said it was the ugliest piece of furniture she had ever loved. He carried it outside. Ayana stood where he had left her, the document now tucked back against her skin. She watched him cross the yard, watched him set the chair on the porch beside his own, watched him straighten up and look at her without speaking. "One night's over," she said. "I know. Sun's up. I know that too." The jay screamed again in the pines. The mare stamped once, twice, then went still. The smell of warming earth rose from the ground as the frost finished melting. "I ain't asking you to fight for me," Ayana said. "That's not why I came here." Caleb looked at the trail leading out of the canyon. 40 miles to Tucson. 19 days behind her. A man with legal papers and money, and the kind of patience that came from knowing the law was on your side. "Why did you come here?" he asked. "To me. Specifically." Ayana climbed the porch steps. The boards creaked under her weight. She stood beside the second chair and ran her fingers along the rough pine back, tracing the grain the way you trace a scar you have learned to live with. "Because I heard about the man who lives alone in Miller Canyon. The man who wants nothing from anyone." She met his eyes. "I figured you were the one person who wouldn't try to fix me." The words hung between them in the morning air. Caleb thought about Margaret, about the letter from his sister, still unopened on the table inside, about 11 years of silence and solitude, and telling himself it was enough. Telling himself the quiet was peaceful, when really it was just empty. "Sit down," he said. Ayana sat. He went inside and came back with 2 tin cups of coffee, black and bitter, steam rising in the cool morning air. He handed her the cup with the chip on the rim. Margaret's cup, the one he had not let anyone else use since she died, and lowered himself into the chair beside her. They did not speak. The canyon brightened around them, shadows retreating up the red rock walls. The day coming whether they were ready for it or not. A red-tailed hawk circled overhead, riding the warming air. The smell of coffee mixed with sage and juniper and horse. Caleb sipped from his cup and watched the trail. The same trail he had watched every morning for 11 years without knowing what he was waiting for. Now he knew. He was not waiting anymore. 3 days. She had asked for time to rest, to plan, to disappear into the mountains where Slade could not follow, but sitting there in the chair his dead wife had loved, beside a woman who carried her bill of sale against her heart like a scar she could not remove. Caleb felt something shift in his chest, something that had been locked up tight since Margaret died, not buried, just locked, stored away where it could not hurt him anymore. He did not name it, did not examine it. He just drank his coffee and watched the sun climb higher over the canyon rim. The quiet lasted until mid-morning. Then the sound of hooves on the eastern trail, coming fast. Caleb's hand found this porch rail. His knuckles whitened against the weathered wood. The hoofbeats grew louder, echoing off the canyon walls. A single horse moving at a trot. Not the thunder of a posse, not the careful walk of a hunter stalking prey. Just one rider, coming fast. The rhythm urgent but not panicked. Ayanna was already on her feet, her body angled toward the barn, toward escape. The coffee cup trembled in her hand, dark liquid sloshing over the rim and dripping onto the porch boards. "Wait!" Caleb held up his hand. "I know that horse." The bay rounded the red rock outcrop and came into view, lathered and blowing hard. A boy sat in the saddle, maybe 12 years old, his shirt dark with sweat despite the morning cool, his face flushed red from riding. Tommy Wheeler, the shopkeeper's son. Caleb let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. "Mr. Wright." Tommy pulled up at the fence, sawing on the reins. The horse danced beneath him, tossing its head. "Pa sent me. Said you should know." "Know what?" The boy's eyes flicked to Ayanna, then back to Caleb. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. "There's a man in town. Arrived yesterday on the Tucson stage. Asking questions about an Indian woman traveling alone." Tommy wiped his nose with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of dust across his upper lip, offering money for information. Good money. Caleb felt Ayanna go still beside him, not moving, not breathing, like a deer that has caught the scent of a wolf. "What's his name?" "Slade. Garrett Slade." The name landed in the silence like a stone dropped into deep water. Caleb kept his voice steady. "What else?" "He's got papers, Mr. Wright. Official looking. Show them to my pa." "To the deputy." "To anyone who'd look." The boy's young face was pale beneath the dust, his eyes too wide. "Says the woman's his property. Says anyone helping her is breaking territorial law." The mare stamped and tossed her head, catching the tension in the air. Tommy gathered the reins tighter, fighting to keep her still. "Pa said to tell you. Said you'd want to know." The boy's eyes moved to Ayanna again, and this time they stayed, taking in the calico dress, the dark hair, the careful stillness. "Is she, thank your pa for me?" Caleb cut him off. Now get on home. Tommy hesitated, his mouth opening like he wanted to say something more. Then he thought better of it. He wheeled the horse around and kicked it into a canter, disappearing around the outcrop the way he had come, the hoofbeats fading into the distance until the canyon was quiet again. The quiet felt different now, heavier, full of things unsaid. Ayanna walked into the cabin without a word. Caleb found her standing by the table, her satchel already in her hands. When she was stuffing the few items, she had unpacked a bone comb with missing teeth, a small knife with a worn handle, a strip of dried meat wrapped in cloth back into the worn leather with quick, efficient movements. "What are you doing, leaving?" Her hands moved fast. Fingers, sure. "I told you. I'm not asking you to fight for me. I didn't say anything about fighting. You don't have to." She cinched the satchel closed with a hard yank on the strap. "He's in town. That's 10 miles. He'll have someone who can track, someone who can read sign. They'll find this place by nightfall. Maybe sooner." Caleb stepped in front of the door. Ayanna stopped. Her jaw tightened, the muscles standing out beneath the skin. "Move." "No." "I said move." And I said no. They stood there, 3 feet apart, the morning light cutting between them through the window. Dust motes floated in the shaft of sun, lazy and slow, unaware of the tension filling the room. Caleb could see the pulse jumping in her throat, could see the fine tremor in her hands that she was trying to hide by gripping the satchel strap tighter. "Sit down," he said. "I don't have time to sit down and eat something. Then we figure this out." Ayanna stared at him. Her eyes searched his face, looking for something, the lie, maybe, or the angle, or the reason a man she had known for less than a day would plant himself between her and the door. Whatever she was looking for, she did not seem to find it. She sat. Caleb moved to the hearth and stirred the coals back to life with the iron poker. The smell of wood ash rose up, familiar and sharp. He set the cast iron pot over the flames, the leftover stew from 2 nights ago still crusted around the edges. While it heated, he sliced cornbread from the pan on the shelf, his knife moving in slow, deliberate strokes, the blade scraping against the cast iron with a sound like a whisper. The cabin filled with the smell of warming meat and onions, and something else, sage. Maybe from the wild herbs Margaret used to hang in bundles from the rafters. The bundles were gone now, crumbled to dust years ago, but sometimes Caleb swore he could still smell them when the cabin got warm. He placed a plate in front of Ayanna. She did not touch it. "Why?" she asked. "Why what? Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Caleb sat down across from her. The table was small, built for 2, but used by one for so long that the other side had become a place to stack books and old newspapers. Their knees almost touched beneath it. 11 years ago, he said, I buried my wife in the plot behind the barn. Cholera took her in 3 days. 3 days from laughing in this kitchen to cold in that bedroom. Ayanna's hand stilled on the table. After the funeral, I stopped talking to people. Stopped going to town unless I had to. Stopped doing much of anything except waking up and waiting for the day to end so I could sleep and not have to think about her being gone. He picked up his coffee cup. looked into it, set it down. The coffee had gone cold. Told myself I was fine. Told myself I liked the quiet. Did you? No. The word came out harder than he intended. I just got used to it. Got so used to it, I forgot there was anything else. Ayanna was watching him now, her eyes dark and steady, giving away nothing. Then you show up at my fence line, Caleb shook his head slowly, and I don't know what to do with that. I really don't. But I know I'm not going to watch you walk out that door and disappear into those mountains alone. Not while that man's out there hunting you like an animal he lost. The stew bubbled in the pot, the lid rattling softly. The fire crackled and popped. A knot in the wood exploding with a sharp snap. Outside, the jay started screaming again in the pines, its harsh cry echoing off the canyon walls. Eat, Caleb said. Then we talk. Ayanna picked up the spoon. They ate in silence. The only sounds, the scrape of metal on tin, the settling of the fire, the wind moving through the junipers outside and making them sigh like tired old men. When the plates were empty, Caleb gathered them and set them in the wash bucket by the door. Tell me about him, he said, his back to her as he poured water from the pitcher. Slade. What kind of man is he? Patient. The word came out flat, like she had said it many times before. He doesn't lose his temper, doesn't raise his voice, just waits. Keeps waiting until he gets what he wants. Violent. Doesn't need to be. He's got money. Money buys men who'll do the violence for him. Caleb turned around. Ayanna sat with her hands flat on the table, her shoulders straight, her chin lifted. The posture of someone who had learned long ago not to show weakness, not to flinch, not to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her afraid. What happened to the others? He asked. She frowned. What others? The ones before you? The ones he bought? Ayanna's face went blank. A door closing, shutters drawn. Nothing to see here. There were no others. You don't know that. I know he wanted an Apache wife. Wanted one for years. Talked about it like other men talk about buying a new horse or a piece of land. Her voice was flat, colorless, scraped clean of feeling. I was the first one the agent could deliver. Caleb leaned against the counter, arms crossed over his chest. The morning had turned warm, sunlight streaming through the window and pooling on the plank floor in a rectangle of gold. He's got legal papers, he said, a bill of sale, territorial seal. He can wave those at any lawman west of Santa Fe, and they'll side with him. I know. So, running doesn't solve anything. He'll just keep coming. You can't run forever. I've been running 19 days. I can run 19 more. And then what? Ayanna did not answer. Caleb pushed off from the counter and walked to the window, outside. The canyon stretched away toward the eastern ridge, the trail winding down through the junipers, empty and quiet and waiting. There's another way, he said. What way? He did not turn around. The law says a married woman can't be property, can't be bought, can't be sold, can't be claimed by anyone except her husband. The silence behind him was absolute. What are you saying? Ayanna's voice was barely above a whisper. Caleb turned, looked at her. I'm saying there's a preacher in Tucson who owes me a favor. or a mission on the Gila River. If Tucson's too dangerous, Father Esteban, he married Margaret and me 15 years ago. He paused, watching her face. I'm saying if Slade shows up here with his papers and his money and his patience, he can't touch a woman who's already married to someone else. Ayanna stared at him. Her face had gone pale beneath the brown of her skin, her lips parted, her eyes wide. You don't know me. No. You don't love me. No. Then why would you? Because it's the only play we've got. Caleb crossed the room and sat down across from her again, close enough to see the pulse beating in her throat, the fine lines around her eyes, the way her hands had begun to shake again despite her best efforts to keep them still. Listen to me. This isn't about love. This isn't about forever. This is about keeping you out of that man's hands. We get married, we get the paper. Slade loses his legal claim. After that, he spread his hands. After that, we figure it out. Ayanna was shaking her head. You'd give up your whole life, your freedom, for a stranger? What freedom? Caleb's voice cracked, and he did not bother to hide it. What life? Sitting in this cabin alone, until I die, talking to myself because there's no one else to talk to, reading the same books until the pages fall out. That's not a life. That's just waiting for the end with nothing to show for it. The fire had burned down to embers. The cabin was quiet. The only sound their breathing and the distant calls of the jay and the wind in the trees. Ayanna looked at him for a long time. Why me? She asked finally. Out of everyone in the world, why would you do this for me? Caleb thought about Margaret, about the chair on the porch, about 11 years of silence and solitude, and the slow wearing away of everything that made him feel human. Because you're here, he said, and I'm tired of being alone. The words hung in the air between them. Ayanna's hand moved across the table. Her fingers brushed his, light as a moth's wing, and then withdrew. I need to think, she said. Take all the time you need. She stood, walked to the door, stopped with her hand on the frame, her back to him, her shoulders tight. Mr. Wright? Caleb! Caleb! She turned her head, not quite looking at him, her profile sharp against the bright rectangle of the doorway. The roof. You said it leaks. In the northwest corner. Every time it rains. I'll take a look this afternoon. If I'm staying, I might as well be useful. She walked out into the sunlight. Caleb sat at the table for a long while, staring at the place where her hand had touched his. Then he got up and went to find the ladder. The roof was steeper than it looked from the ground. Caleb braced his boots against the cedar shingles, one hand gripping the ridge beam, the other holding a hammer. The wood was warm from the sun, rough against his palms. Below him, Ayanna stood with an armful of new shingles he had cut last spring and never gotten around to using. Her neck craned back to watch his progress. 2 more to the left, she called up. There's a gap where the water gets in. He shifted his weight carefully, the old wood creaking beneath him. 11 years of Arizona sun had baked the shingles dry and brittle as old bones. He should have fixed this years ago, should have done a lot of things. The hammer struck true, driving the nail through the fresh cedar and into the beam below. The sound rang out across the canyon, sharp and clear. Once, twice, 3 times. Good. Ayanna shaded her eyes with her free hand. Now one more above that. Where the wood's gone soft. Caleb reached for another shingle, and his boot slipped. For a single, sickening moment, he was falling, his hands scrabbling for purchase on the ridge beam, his body tilting sideways, gravity pulling him toward the edge and the hard ground 15 feet below. Then Ayanna was there. She had dropped the shingles and climbed the ladder faster than he would have thought possible, her hand closing around his wrist like a vice. Her grip was iron, tendons standing out beneath the skin, holding him steady until he could find his footing again. They stayed that way for a breath. 2, 3. "You're not as steady as you think," she said. Caleb's heart was slamming against his ribs. Sweat had broken out across his forehead despite the cool air. "Reckon not." She did not let go. Her fingers remained locked around his wrist, her eyes searching his face. "You could have fallen, broken your neck. But I didn't, because I was here." "Yes." The wind picked up, carrying the smell of pine and dust and the faint sweetness of the wild sage that grew along the ridge. Ayanna's hair had come loose from its tie, dark strands whipping across her face. "I've thought about it," she said. "Your offer..." Caleb waited. "If we do this, if we go to that mission and find this preacher of yours, I need you to understand something." Her grip on his wrist tightened. "I'm not a woman who breaks promises. If I say the words, I mean them. Maybe not the way you meant them with your Margaret, but I'll mean them my own way. I'm not asking for anything more than that." "I know. That's why I'm saying yes." The words settled between them. Caleb felt something shift in his chest, something that had been locked up tight for 11 years, rusted shut from disuse. "Okay," he said. "Okay." She let go of his wrist and started down the ladder. Caleb stayed on the roof, watching her descend, watching her gather the fallen shingles and stack them neatly against the cabin wall, watching her move through his world as if she had always been there, as if the space she occupied had been waiting for her all along. That evening, they sat on the porch as the sun went down. 2 chairs now, 2 cups of coffee, the canyon turning red and gold around them, the shadows stretching long across the ground. "Tell me about her," Ayanna said. Caleb did not have to ask who she meant. Margaret, the name still caught in his throat, even after all these years, like a fishbone he could never quite swallow. "She was a school teacher in Ohio when I met her. Came west with her brother to Homestead. He died of fever the first winter, and she stayed on alone. Stubbornest woman I ever knew." "Stubborn enough to marry a man like you," Caleb laughed. The sound surprised him rusty, like a gate that had not been opened in too long. "Stubborn enough for that?" "Yes." He looked down at his coffee, at the dark surface reflecting the sunset. "She used to say that loneliness was just the Lord's way of making room in your heart for someone new. I didn't believe her then. Thought she was just being sentimental. And now..." He looked at Ayanna, at the way the fading light caught the curve of her cheek, the line of her jaw, the steady calm in her eyes. "Now I'm not so sure." The stars came out one by one, pricking through the darkening sky. The night birds started their calling, soft and questioning, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled once and went silent, My grandmother used to say something, Ayanna said. Her voice was soft, almost swallowed by the gathering dark. She said survival isn't living, just slower dying. I believed her for a long time. What do you believe now? She was quiet so long that Caleb thought she would not answer. Then she reached out and put her hand over his. Her palm was warm and rough with calluses from work. Her fingers curled around his, holding on. I believe I'm tired of just surviving, she said. They sat there as the night deepened around them, her hand in his, the coffee going cold in their cups. Caleb did not move, neither did she. But sometime in the small hours, when the moon had risen full and bright above the canyon rim and the coyotes had gone quiet, Ayanna spoke again. There's something I haven't told you, she said. About Slade. Caleb's hand tightened around hers. What? He doesn't just want me back. Her voice was barely a whisper, almost lost in the night sounds. The night I left, I took something from his safe, something he needs more than he needs me. Caleb's hand went still around hers. What did you take? Ayanna pulled her hand back. She stood, walked to the edge of the porch, and leaned against the post. The moonlight turned her profile to silver, the lines of her face sharp against the darkness. Letters, she said, from a man in Washington, a senator. Caleb's stomach tightened. What kind of letters? The kind that would put Slade in prison for a long time. The kind that would end the senator's career. She turned to face him, her eyes catching the moonlight. Slade's been running guns to the reservations for years, selling rifles to Apache bands that the Army's trying to pacify. The senator takes a cut and makes sure nobody asks questions. The letters prove all of it. The night air had gone cold. Caleb could feel it seeping through his jacket, settling into his bones the way it did in late October, when the desert remembered it was supposed to be winter. Where are they now? Ayanna touched the leather pouch at her neck, the one he had seen that first morning, hidden beneath her collar. Right here. I've carried them for 19 days, slept with them against my skin. They're the only thing keeping me alive. How do you figure? Because Slade knows that if anything happens to me, those letters go straight to the territorial marshal. I wrote it all down before I left, names, dates, what's in each letter. Gave it to a woman I trust at the reservation. If I don't send word every 2 weeks, she sends everything to the law. Caleb leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped together. That's why he hasn't just shot you and been done with it. Yes. And that's why he's being patient. He needs those letters back before he can touch you. Yes. The coyote howled again. Closer this time, the sound raised the hair on Caleb's arms, primal and lonely. You should have told me this before. Would it have changed anything? Caleb thought about it, about the bill of sale, about the offer he had made, about the woman standing in the moonlight with enough evidence to bring down a senator hidden in a pouch against her heart. No, he said. I reckon it wouldn't. Ayanna came back to her chair. She did not sit. She stood over him, looking down at his face, her expression unreadable in the darkness. I'm not a helpless woman. Caleb, I didn't take those letters because I was desperate. I took them because they were the only weapon I had. The only way to make him afraid of me instead of the other way around. I understand. Do you? Her voice sharpened. Do you understand what you're getting into if we go to that mission? If we get married, you become part of this. Slade won't just be hunting me anymore. He'll be hunting you too. Caleb stood. They were close now, close enough that he could smell the sage in her hair, the wood smoke on her clothes, the faint scent of sweat and dust that clung to anyone who had been traveling hard. I spent 4 years in the cavalry, he said. Rode with Crook through the Tonto Basin, buried friends at Big Dry Wash. I've been hunted before. This is different. How? Ayanna's eyes searched his face. Because this time, you have something to lose. The words hit him harder than he expected. He turned away, walked to the other end of the porch, and stood looking out at the canyon. The moon hung fat and white above the eastern ridge. The junipers cast long shadows across the red earth. Everything was still, peaceful, beautiful in a way that made his chest ache with something he could not name. I had something to lose once, he said. Lost it anyway. Cholera doesn't care about what you have. It just takes. Caleb, my wife died in that bedroom. He pointed toward the dark window behind him. 3 days from healthy to gone. I held her hand until she stopped breathing. And then I held it some more because I didn't know what else to do. Because letting go felt like giving up. Like admitting she was really gone. Ayanna said nothing. After she was buried, I stopped caring about pretty much everything. Told myself I was fine with the quiet. Told myself I didn't need anyone. But the truth is, I was just scared. He turned back to face her. Scared that if I let myself care about something again, it would get taken away just like she was. Ayanna crossed the porch. She stood in front of him, close enough to touch. My grandmother used to say that some wounds never heal, she said. They just stop bleeding. You learn to walk with them. You learn to live around the hole they leave. What do you think? I think she was right. Ayanna reached up and touched his face. Her fingers were cool against his stubbled cheek, her touch gentle but firm. But I also think that sometimes, if you're lucky, you find someone else carrying the same kind of wounds, and you figure out how to walk together. Caleb did not move, did not breathe. Her hand dropped. Tomorrow, she said. We should leave for the mission tomorrow. Before Slade figures out where I am, before he has time to set a trap. All right. And Caleb, yes, thank you for not running when I told you about the letters. He almost laughed. Where would I run to? This is the only home I've got. Ayanna smiled. It was only the second time he had seen her smile, and it changed her face the way sunrise changes a canyon, softening the hard edges, filling the shadows with light. It made him want to see it again. Get some sleep, she said. Long ride tomorrow. She walked inside, the screen door creaking shut behind her. Caleb stayed on the porch, watching the moon track across the sky, thinking about letters and senators and a man named Slade who had bought a woman for $40 and sundry goods. The next morning came cold and gray. Caleb was up before dawn, saddling the mare and loading supplies into the saddlebags. Coffee, hardtack, jerky, enough for 2 days if they pushed hard. Ayanna emerged from the cabin as the first light touched the ridge. She wore her Anglo dress, but she had tied her hair back with a strip of leather in a way he had not seen before. The leather pouch was invisible beneath her collar. "Ready?" Caleb asked. "Ready?" He helped her up onto the mare's back, then swung up behind her. The horse shifted beneath them, adjusting to the double weight. "We'll take the back trail," Caleb said. "Over the ridge and down through Salt Creek Canyon. Adds a day to the trip, but it keeps us off the main road." Slade will have men watching the main road. That's what I figured. Yet he touched his heels to the mare's sides, and they started up the canyon toward the western ridge. The trail was narrow and steep, switching back on itself as it climbed through stands of juniper and pinyon pine. Caleb kept his eyes on the terrain ahead, picking the safest route, avoiding loose rocks and washouts that could send the horse tumbling. Behind him, Ayanna sat steady and silent, her hands resting lightly on his waist. They reached the top of the ridge as the sun broke over the mountains to the east. Caleb reined in. Below them, the world fell away in layers of red and gold and dusty brown. Mesas and buttes stretched to the horizon, carved by wind and water over more years than a man could count. The desert floor shimmered in the early light, hazy with distance. "I forgot how big it is," Ayanna said softly. Caleb looked out at the emptiness. "My wife used to say the desert was the Lord's way of reminding us how small we are, how little we matter in the grand scheme of things." Did you believe her? I do now. They started down the other side. The descent was easier than the climb, the trail wider and more forgiving. They rode in silence. The only sounds the horses' hooves on stone and the occasional cry of a hawk circling overhead, riding the warming air. Midday came and went. They stopped by a small spring to water the horse and eat a cold meal of hardtack and jerky. Ayanna sat on a flat rock, her face lifted to the sun, her eyes closed. Caleb watched her. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yes." "Your name." "Ayanna. What does it mean?" She opened her eyes. "Eternal bloom. My mother named me that because I was born in the spring, when the desert flowers were blooming. She wanted me to have that kind of strength, the kind that survives drought and fire and still comes back." "Did she live to see you grow up?" "No." Ayanna's voice was flat, matter of fact, the way people sound when they have said something so many times it has lost its edges. "She died when I was 7. Soldiers came to our camp. She told me to run and hide. I did." Caleb did not ask what happened after. He did not need to. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was a long time ago. I've made my peace with it." She stood, brushing the dust from her dress. "We should keep moving. I want to be through the canyon before dark." They mounted up and rode on. The canyon narrowed as they descended, the walls rising higher on either side, blocking out the sun. The air grew cooler, damper. Water trickled somewhere nearby, feeding into a creek that paralleled the trail. Caleb felt the mare tense beneath him. He reined in. "What is it?" Ayanna whispered. "I don't know. Something spooked her." He scanned the canyon walls, looking for movement. The shadows were deep here, the light filtering down in pale shafts that did not reach the canyon floor. Nothing. No birds calling, no insects buzzing, just the trickle of water and the horse's labored breathing and the silence pressing in from all sides. We should... The shot came from above. The bullet struck the rock 3 feet to their left, spraying chips of stone that stung Caleb's face like angry hornets. The mare screamed and reared, nearly throwing them both. Caleb grabbed the reins with one hand and Ayanna with the other, hauling her tight against him as the horse bolted down the canyon. Another shot, closer this time. The bullet whined past his ear, so close he felt the wind of it. "Keep your head down," he shouted. The canyon walls blurred past them. The mare's hooves pounded against the stone, slipping and sliding on the loose gravel. Caleb could hear men shouting behind them, could hear the thunder of pursuing horses. A third shot kicked up dust just ahead of them. Up ahead, the canyon split into 2 passages. Left led deeper into the mountains. Rough terrain, hard to follow, dangerous in the dark. Right led toward the main road. Faster, but exposed. Caleb made his choice in a heartbeat. He yanked the reins left. The mare plunged into the narrow passage. Brush scraping against Caleb's legs. Branches whipping at his face. Behind them, the shouting grew fainter, confused. They rode until the horse could run no more. Caleb pulled up in a small clearing hidden by a stand of cottonwoods. The mare stood trembling, her sides heaving, foam dripping from her mouth. Ayanna slid off the horse's back. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. "Are you hurt?" Caleb asked. She shook her head. "How did they find us?" Caleb swung down from the saddle. His legs felt weak, his heart pounding against his ribs. "They didn't find us, Yisha," he said. "They were waiting for us. Someone told them which trail we would take." Ayanna's eyes widened. "The shopkeeper's boy, Tommy." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Or his father. Slade said he was paying for information. Good money." The boy said. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The cottonwood leaves rustled in the evening breeze. "What do we do now?" Ayanna asked. Caleb looked at her, looked at the exhausted horse, looked at the darkening sky. "We wait until full dark. Then we move. On foot if we have to. And the mission? Forget the mission for now. They'll be watching every approach." He ran his hand through his hair, thinking, "There's a line shack about 4 miles south. Old shepherd's place. Abandoned now. But there might be supplies. We can hole up there until we figure out our next move. How far to the Gila River from there?" Caleb looked south, toward the mountains, rising black against the fading light. 2 days, maybe 3. If we have to go careful. Ayanna nodded slowly. "Then we have 2 days to stay alive." She reached beneath her collar and touched the leather pouch. "Slade won't stop. Not until he has these letters. Not until he has me." Caleb stepped closer, put his hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll have to make sure he doesn't get either." The darkness came quickly, swallowing the canyon, swallowing the world, and somewhere in that darkness, moving closer with every passing minute, Caleb heard hoofbeats again. Caleb pressed his hand over Ayanna's mouth. She went rigid against him, her breath hot against his palm. He pulled her down behind the cottonwood trunk, his other hand finding her shoulder in the darkness. Steadying her, the hoofbeats grew louder. 2 horses, maybe 3, moving slow, picking their way through the darkness. Hooves clicking against loose stone. Caleb's rifle was on the saddle. 10 feet away, strapped to the exhausted mare who stood with her head hanging low. Might as well have been 10 miles. He pressed his lips to Ayana's ear. "Don't move. Don't breathe," she nodded against his hand. The riders emerged from the tree line, their shapes black against the purple sky. 3 of them, sitting easy in their saddles, their horses stamping and blowing. They stopped at the edge of the clearing, not 20 yards from where Caleb and Ayana crouched behind the cottonwood. "Lost the trail," a man's voice, rough with frustration. "Too dark to track 'em." "Slade ain't gonna like that. Slade can come out here and track them himself if he don't like it. I ain't breaking my horse's leg on these rocks in the dark." Silence. The horses shifted, leather creaking. One of them snorted and tossed its head. They went left at the split, into the rough country. Can't have gone far on a blown horse. So we wait till morning, pick up the trail at first light, and if they move during the night, where they gonna go? Nothing out here but rock and cactus and sidewinders. They'll hole up somewhere. We'll find them. The third man spoke for the first time. His voice was different from the others, quieter, more deliberate. The voice of a man who did not waste words. "Mr. Slade wants the woman alive. The man doesn't matter." Caleb's hand tightened on Ayana's shoulder. "Understood," the first man said. "We'll bring her back breathing. Can't promise nothing about the other one." The horses turned. The hoofbeats faded back into the darkness, heading east toward the canyon mouth. Caleb waited. 1 minute, 2, 5. The night sounds returned slowly. Crickets first, tentative, then bolder. An owl somewhere in the cottonwoods, asking its question over and over. The creek gurgling over stones nearby. He released Ayana. She sagged against the tree trunk, her chest heaving. In the dim starlight, he could see the whites of her eyes. "They'll come back at dawn," she whispered. "I know. We have to move." "I know that too." Caleb crawled to the mare. The horse stood with her head down, exhausted, her legs trembling beneath her. He ran his hand along her flank, feeling the heat radiating through her coat. Too hot. She had been ridden too hard, pushed past what she had left to give. "She can't carry us both," he said. "Not tonight. Not in this terrain." Ayana came up beside him, her bare feet silent on the ground. "Then we walk." It's 30 miles to the Gila River Mission. We'd never make it on foot before they catch up. What's the alternative? Stay here and wait for them to find us. Caleb leaned his forehead against the mare's neck. The horse smelled of sweat and fear, and something else, something wrong. A wet rattle in her breathing that had not been there before. He put his ear to her chest and listened. "She's done," he said quietly. "Push too hard. Her lungs are filling up." Ayana put her hand on the horse's muzzle. The mare nuzzled weakly against her palm, too tired to do more. "I'm sorry," Ayana said. To the horse, to Caleb, to no one in particular. Caleb straightened up. "There's a line shack about 4 miles south. Old shepherd's place, abandoned years ago. Might be supplies there. Water, at least. We can hole up until she recovers enough to travel. And if she doesn't recover..." He did not answer. They started walking. The terrain was brutal in the darkness. Loose shale that shifted and slid beneath their feet. Hidden washes that dropped away without warning, cactus that reached out and grabbed at their clothes with thorns sharp as needles. Caleb led the mare by the reins, picking his way by starlight and memory, feeling the ground with his boots before committing his weight. Ayanna walked beside him, her steps sure despite the rough ground. She moved through the darkness like a ghost, barely making a sound, her feet finding the safe places as if she could see in the dark. They did not speak. Speaking took energy they could not spare. The moon rose around midnight, washing the desert in pale silver light. It helped them see, but also made them visible two figures and a stumbling horse. Dark shapes against the gray land. Caleb kept to the shadows whenever possible, skirting the open ground, staying close to the rocks and brush. His legs burned, his back ached. His feet felt like they were wrapped in fire, but he kept walking. The line shack appeared just before dawn, a darker shape against the graying sky. It was smaller than Caleb remembered, a single room, maybe 12 feet square, with a sod roof and walls of rough-hewn logs chinked with mud that had crumbled away in places. The door hung crooked on leather hinges. One window, no glass, just a wooden shutter that had rotted halfway off. Caleb pushed the door open and stepped inside. The smell hit him first. Dust and old sulky, and the sharp musk of animal droppings, pack rats. Probably. Maybe a skunk that had denned here during the winter. He waited for his eyes to adjust to the dimness. A stone fireplace on the far wall. The chimney black with soot from years of fires. A wooden bunk in the corner. The mattress long gone. Just bare boards gray with age. A shelf above it holding a few rusted cans. A water barrel in the opposite corner. He crossed to the barrel and lifted the lid, hoping against hope. Empty. Bone dry. Nothing, he said. Ayanna came in behind him, leading the mare through the doorway. The horse barely fit, her sides scraping against the frame. She tied the reins to a nail in the wall and moved to the shelf. Cans are still sealed. She picked one up, shook it. Something sloshed inside. Tomatoes, maybe. Or peaches. No opener. I have a knife. Caleb sank down on the bunk, his legs suddenly refusing to hold him up any longer. 4 miles did not sound like much when you said it out loud. In the dark, over broken ground, leading a sick horse. It had felt like 40. Ayanna worked on the can with her knife, the blade punching through the tin with a soft pop. The smell that rose up made Caleb's mouth water. Peaches, sweet and heavy with syrup. She handed him the can. He drank the syrup first, the sweetness flooding his mouth, thick and warm. Then fished out the slices with his fingers and ate them one by one. They were soft and too sweet, and tasted better than anything he had eaten in years. Ayanna opened a second can, tomatoes. She ate them standing up, the red juice running down her chin and dripping onto the dirt floor. Outside, the mare coughed. Caleb went to check on her. The horse stood with her head hanging even lower than before, her sides heaving with each breath. He put his ear to her chest again. The wet rattle was worse now. A thick, bubbling sound that came with every exhale. How bad? Ayanna asked from the doorway. Bad. She might pull through if she rests a day or two. Might not. And if she doesn't, Caleb stroked the mare's neck, feeling the rough hair beneath his palm. Then we're on foot with 3 men on horseback, hunting us. Ayanna leaned against the doorframe. The first light of dawn was creeping over the eastern ridge, turning the sky from black to gray to the pale pink that came just before sunrise. "I should have kept running," she said. "I should never have stopped at your cabin." Caleb turned to look at her. "You regret it?" "No." She shook her head slowly. "That's the problem. I don't regret any of it. Not meeting you, not telling you about the letters, not any of this." She pushed off from the doorframe and walked toward him. "I've been alone for a long time, Caleb, since I was 7 years old. Really. I learned to survive by myself, learned to trust no one but myself. It's kept me alive this long. But I'm tired of it." She stopped in front of him. "I'm tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of waking up every morning and wondering if this is the day they finally catch up to me." Caleb reached out and took her hand. "Then stop running. We'll figure something out. There's always another way." "You really believe that? I have to. Otherwise, what's the point of any of it?" Ayanna's fingers curled around his and held on. "My grandmother used to say that some people are born to find each other, like stars that travel the same path across the sky, even when they're too far apart to see. Do you believe that?" "I didn't for a long time. I believed there was only survival, only running, only staying one step ahead of the people who wanted to hurt me." She squeezed his hand. "But then I found your cabin, and you gave me water when you could have turned me away. And you offered me shelter when you had every reason not to. And you came with me when any sensible man would have stayed behind." Her eyes met his in the gray light of dawn. "Maybe I was wrong. Maybe there is such a thing as paths crossing. Maybe I was always meant to find you." Caleb looked at their joined hands, at the rope burns still healing on her wrists from where she had been bound at some point during her 19 days of running, at the calluses and scars on his own hands, earned over 47 years of hard living. "I'm too old to start over," he said. "That's what I kept telling myself. Too old, too tired, too broken to try again. And now I think maybe I was just too scared to try." Ayanna stepped closer. "Bonjour," she said softly. Caleb frowned. "What does that mean?" "It's Apache. Old words. My grandmother's words." She reached up and put her hand on his chest, over his heart. "It means I am here for you." The words hung in the cold morning air. Not "I love you," not "I will stay." Something older than that. Something deeper. The promise to show up, to be present, to stand beside someone, no matter what came next. Caleb covered her hand with his own. "Ayanna." The mare collapsed. The sound was terrible, a great crashing thud, as the horse's legs gave out, and she went down hard on the dirt floor, her body hitting with a force that shook the walls of the little shack. Dust rose in a cloud. The rusted cans rattled on the shelf. Caleb was at her side in an instant, his hands on her neck, feeling for a pulse. The mare's eyes were open, glassy, staring at nothing. Her chest rose once, fell, and did not rise again. He knelt there in the dust, his hands on the dead horse, the morning light creeping through the broken shutter. They were 40 miles from the mission, on foot, with 3 armed men hunting them, and somewhere out there, getting closer with every passing hour, a man named Slade, who would not stop until he had what he wanted. Caleb knelt beside the dead mare until the sun cleared the ridge and spilled through the broken shutter. His knees ached against the hard-packed dirt. His hands rested on the horse's still warm neck, feeling the heat leave her body degree by degree. He had raised this mare from a foal, watched her take her first wobbling steps in the corral behind the cabin, trained her himself over 3 patient years. Now she lay in the dust of an abandoned line shack, and he could not even bury her. "Caleb," Ayanna's voice came from far away. "We need to move. They'll find this place." He did not move. "Caleb, please." He stood up slowly, his joints protesting, his back screaming. The mare's glassy eyes stared at nothing. Flies were already gathering, drawn by the smell of death that would only grow stronger as the day warmed. "The rifle," he said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, flat and hollow. "It's still on the saddle." He unbuckled the scabbard from the dead horse's tack, his fingers clumsy and slow. The leather was stiff with dried sweat. The sharps slid free, heavy and familiar in his hands. He checked the chamber. 1 round, the one he had left loaded out of habit. He had not thought to bring more, had not thought much at all beyond getting Ayanna to safety. 1 round against 3 armed men. The weight of his failure pressed down on him like a physical thing, crushing his chest, making it hard to breathe. "We go south," he said. "Stay off the trails. There's a creek about 2 miles from here that runs toward the river. We follow it. We might be able to—" The sound of hoofbeats cut him off. Close. Too close. "Out the back," Ayanna hissed. "Now!" The shack had no back door, just a window, the shutter hanging by 1 hinge. Caleb went through first, the rotted wood scraping against his shoulders, and pulled Ayanna after him. They ran. The terrain behind the shack dropped away into a rocky wash, thick with scrub brush and prickly pear. Caleb plunged into it, branches whipping at his face, thorns tearing at his clothes. Ayanna was right behind him, her breath harsh in his ears. Behind them, a shout, then another. They had been seen. The wash twisted and turned, cutting deeper into the rock. Caleb's boots slipped on loose gravel. He went down hard, his knee slamming against a boulder. Pain exploding up his leg. The rifle flew from his hands and clattered against the stones. "Get up!" Ayanna grabbed his arm, hauling him to his feet. "Get up! Caleb!" He scrambled for the rifle, his fingers closing around the stock. Blood ran warm down his shin, soaking into his boot. He did not look at the wound, did not have time. They kept running. The wash opened into a small canyon, the walls rising steep on either side. No way out except forward or back. Caleb's lungs burned. His leg throbbed with every step. He could hear the horses now, hooves clattering on rock, getting closer. A cliff face loomed ahead, blocking the canyon. Dead end. Caleb spun around, raising the rifle. His hands shook. Sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes. One round. The first rider came around the bend, then the second, then the third. They reined in their horses, spreading out across the canyon mouth, blocking any escape. The man in the middle smiled a thin, cruel smile that did not reach his eyes. "End of the line, old man." Caleb kept the rifle raised, the barrel moving between the three men. His finger found the trigger. One round. He could take one of them, maybe, if his hands would stop shaking. "Put it down," the man said. "No sense in dying over a woman who ain't even yours. She's not property. The law says different." The man reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. Even from 20 feet away, Caleb could see the territorial seal. Bill of sale, legal and binding. "Now put down the rifle and step away from the woman. And maybe we let you walk out of here." Caleb's arms were trembling from holding the rifle up. His knee buckled, and he caught himself. But the weakness showed. He saw it in the man's eyes, the recognition that he was facing a tired old man with one bullet and nowhere to run. "Caleb." Ayana's voice was quiet, calm. "Put it down." He turned to look at her. Her face was still, composed, the way it had been that first night at his fence line. No fear, no panic, just that terrible patience. The patience of someone who had spent her whole life waiting for the worst to happen. "Put it down," she said again. "I'll go with them." "No, it's over. There's no way out. I said no." The man on horseback laughed. "Ain't that sweet? The old fool thinks he can save her." Caleb's finger tightened on the trigger. The rifle roared. The shot went wide. He knew it even as he fired, his shaking hands throwing the aim off. The bullet struck the canyon wall 10 feet above the rider's head, spraying rock chips into the air. The man did not even flinch. "That was your one chance, Viteyu," he said. "Now you got nothing." The riders dismounted. The man who had spoken drew a pistol. The other two carried ropes. Caleb swung the empty rifle like a club. But his legs gave out, and he went down in the dirt. One of the men kicked the rifle away. Another grabbed his arms and wrenched them behind his back. The rope bit into his wrists. Rough hemp, scraping skin. He struggled. But the men were stronger, younger, and there were more of them. They forced him face down into the dust, a boot pressing between his shoulder blades. The dirt filled his mouth. He could taste it dry and bitter and gritty against his teeth. He could smell it too, the smell of the desert floor, of dead things in ancient rock. His face was pressed into it, his nose and lips grinding against the earth, and he could not move, could not fight, could not do anything but lie there and taste his own failure. He heard Ayana cry out, heard the sounds of a struggle, heard her voice so sharp and furious, then muffled, then silent. The boot lifted from his back. Hands grabbed his jacket and hauled him upright, dragging him through the dirt until his back was against the canyon wall. His wrists were bound behind him, the rope already cutting into his skin. Ayana knelt 10 feet away, her hands tied in front of her, a man's fist wrapped in her hair. Her face was bleeding a cut above her eye, blood running down her cheek. She did not make a sound. The leader crouched down in front of Caleb, Mr. Slade wants the woman delivered, alive and well. He didn't say nothing about you." He leaned closer, close enough that Caleb could smell the tobacco on his breath. "Way I see it, we got two choices. We can leave you here, tied up, let the sun and the coyotes take care of the rest, or we can put a bullet in you now and save everyone the trouble." Caleb said nothing. No brave words, no threats. The man laughed. "Smart. I like that." He stood up and turned to his men. "Tie him to that rock over there. Make sure he can't get loose. We'll be back this way in a couple days. If he's still alive, maybe we'll cut him free. If not," he shrugged, "dessert's full of bones. One more won't make a difference." They dragged Caleb across the canyon floor and lashed him to a boulder. The rope wrapped around his chest and arms so tight he could barely breathe. The rock was rough against his back, still cool from the night. But the sun was climbing higher, and he knew it would be hot soon. Hot enough to cook a man where he sat. Ayanna did not look at him as they put her on one of the horses. Her head was down, her shoulders slumped, all the fight gone out of her. "Ayanna." She did not respond. "Ayanna." The leader mounted his horse and turned toward Caleb one last time. "She can't help you, old man. Nobody can." They rode out of the canyon, the hoofbeats fading, the dust settling, the silence rushing back in to fill the space they had left behind. Caleb was alone. The sun climbed higher. The shadows shrank. The temperature rose, degree by slow degree, until the air shimmered and the rock behind him felt like it was on fire. He worked at the ropes. The hemp was tight, tied by someone who knew what they were doing. Every time he twisted his wrists, the rope cut deeper, scraping away skin, opening wounds that bled warm and sticky down his fingers. He did not stop. The sun reached its peak and began to descend. His lips cracked. His tongue swelled. His thoughts grew fuzzy and strange, drifting in and out of sense. He thought about Margaret, about the way she looked on their wedding day, standing in the little chapel by the Gila River with wildflowers in her hair, about the way she laughed when he burned the biscuits, that full, warm laugh that came from somewhere deep inside her, about the way her hand felt in his, small and warm and certain. He thought about Ayanna, about the way she had stood at his fence line that first night, patient as stone, about her smile, rare and startling, like a desert flower after rain, about the way she had said those words, "She Banjao," with her hand over his heart. He had promised Margaret he would not let her go. He had failed. The shame of it burned worse than the sun, worse than the rope cutting into his wrists, worse than the thirst that was turning his throat to sandpaper. 47 years old, 4 years in the cavalry, survived the Tonto Basin campaign and Big Dry Wash, survived cholera and the loneliness, and 11 years of slow dying in a cabin built for two, but lived in by one. And this was how it ended. Not in a fight, not protecting someone he cared about, just tied to a rock in a nameless canyon, too old and too slow and too weak to save anyone, even himself. The sun began to set. The shadows lengthened across the canyon floor. Caleb's head dropped forward, his chin resting on his chest. He was so tired, so thirsty, so ashamed of his own uselessness that he could barely stand to be inside his own skin. He closed his eyes. Margaret's face swam up from the darkness, but this time she was not smiling. "You promised," she said. "I know. You promised you wouldn't let her go. I know." "Then get up." Caleb's eyes snapped open. The canyon was dark. Night had fallen without him noticing. Stars burned cold and distant overhead. The moon had not yet risen, and someone was cutting the ropes. He felt the blades sawing against the hemp, felt the tension release as the rope parted, felt hands, small hands, rough with calluses, pulling him upright. "Can you stand?" A boy's voice, young, scared, familiar. Caleb blinked, trying to focus. His vision swam. The figure in front of him was small, thin, barely visible in the darkness. "Mr. Wright, we have to go. They're coming back." Tommy Wheeler, the shopkeeper's boy, stood in front of him, a hunting knife in one hand, his face pale as milk in the starlight. "What? How did you? No time!" Tommy grabbed his arm and pulled. "My pa sent me. Said he made a mistake. Telling Slade which trail you took. Said he couldn't live with himself if you died because of it." Caleb's legs buckled. He caught himself against the boulder. "The woman, Ayanna, where did they take her?" "Slade's got a camp about 5 miles east. Old mining claim. That's where he's keeping her until he can move her back to Tucson." 5 miles. Caleb's wrists were raw and bleeding. His knee screamed with every movement. He had no horse, no supplies, no weapon except the empty rifle lying somewhere in the dirt. But 5 miles was not forever. "My rifle," he said. "Is it still here?" "Found it over by the wash. 1 round in the chamber." Caleb pushed himself off the boulder and stood on his own 2 feet. The world spun. He grabbed Tommy's shoulder and held on until it stopped. "Mr. Wright, you can't. You're in no shape to—" "How many men does Slade have at the camp?" Tommy hesitated, his young face tight with worry. 4, maybe 5. All armed. Caleb took the rifle from the boy's hands. Checked the action. Checked the chamber. 1 round. 1 round against 5 armed men. He started walking east. The mining camp sat in a shallow draw between 2 ridges. Caleb lay on his belly in the scrub brush, watching. The moon had risen, washing the desert in pale silver light. His wrists throbbed where the ropes had torn the skin. His knee had stiffened during the 5-mile walk, and every movement sent pain shooting up his leg. 4 tents, a cook fire burning low, embers glowing orange in the darkness. 3 horses picketed near the far ridge, their shapes dark against the sky. And Ayanna, she sat on a wooden crate near the fire, her hands bound in front of her, a rope running from her wrists to an iron stake driven into the ground. One of Slade's men sat across from her, a shotgun across his knees. The others were in the tents, sleeping or resting. Slade's tent was the largest, set apart from the others. A kerosene lamp glowed inside, throwing shadows against the canvas. Caleb counted again. 4 men visible. Slade made 5, 1 round in the rifle, 1 round. He had walked 5 miles in the dark, stumbling over rocks and cactus, falling twice, getting up both times. His body was failing him. He could feel it, the slowness in his limbs, the fog in his head, the way his hands trembled no matter how hard he tried to steady them. He was too old for this, but he was here anyway. The guard by the fire yawned and stretched. He stood up, set the shotgun against the crate, and walked toward the latrine pit at the edge of camp. Caleb moved. He covered the distance in a crouch, keeping low, using the shadows. The scrub brush scraped against his jacket. The sand shifted beneath his boots. Every sound seemed impossibly loud in the quiet night. Ayanna saw him. Her eyes widened. She started to speak. He pressed a finger to his lips. The guard was still at the latrine. His back turned. 20 seconds, maybe 30. Caleb reached the stake and dropped to his knees beside her. His hands found the knot at her wrists, fingers clumsy with exhaustion and dried blood. "What are you doing here?" Ayanna whispered. "What does it look like? You should have stayed away." Too late for that. The knot loosened. Caleb pulled the rope free from her wrists. "Can you walk?" "Yes." "Then follow me. Slow and quiet. We go north. Into the rocks." They moved. 10 feet, 20. The darkness swallowed them. Caleb's heart pounded against his ribs. They were going to make it. Then the guard came back. "Hey!" The shout split the silence like a gunshot. Caleb heard boots pounding, tent flaps snapping open, men cursing as they scrambled for weapons. "Run!" he said. Ayanna ran. Caleb turned and raised the rifle. The guard was coming fast, scrambling for the shotgun by the crate. One round. Caleb aimed low and fired. The bullet struck the ground at the guard's feet, spraying sand and rock. The man stumbled, fell, and the shotgun clattered away from his reaching hand. Caleb did not wait to see if he got up. He turned and ran after Ayanna, the empty rifle clutched in his hands. The rocks rose ahead of them, a jumble of boulders and crevices carved by centuries of wind and water. If they could reach them, they could hide, disappear. Gunfire cracked behind them. A bullet whined past Caleb's ear. He grabbed Ayanna's hand and pulled her into the rocks. They scrambled through a narrow gap, scraping against stone, thorns tearing at their clothes. The shouting grew louder behind them. Torches flared to life. "This way!" Ayanna gasped. She led him through the maze of boulders, turning left, then right, climbing over fallen slabs, dropping into crevices barely wide enough to squeeze through. She knew this terrain, had probably memorized it during the hours she sat by that fire, planning, waiting, watching. They emerged on a ledge overlooking the camp. Below them, Slade's men were spreading out, torches held high, searching the rocks. "They'll find us," Caleb said, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "It's only a matter of time." Ayanna looked at him, her face pale in the moonlight. "Then we make it count." She reached beneath her dress and pulled out a folded sheaf of papers. Caleb stared. "I thought Slade took the letters." "He did." Ayanna's smile was thin, sharp as a blade. "He took the decoys, the ones I wrote myself, copying the senator's handwriting. The real letters are still here." She touched the bodice of her dress, sewn into the lining, where he never thought to look. Caleb laughed. The sound was harsh, ragged, pulled from somewhere deep inside him. "You're something else. You know that I'm a survivor, Ayanna tucked the papers back into hiding. My grandmother taught me, always have a second plan, always keep something hidden. The torches were getting closer. We can't stay here, Caleb said. They'll box us in. There's a trail on the other side of this ridge. It leads down to the river. If we can reach it, how far in 2 miles? Maybe less. Caleb looked at the approaching torches, at the empty rifle in his hands, at the woman beside him who had outplayed a man like Slade, with forgeries and hidden pockets. Let's go. They climbed. The ridge was steep and treacherous. Loose rock shifted beneath their feet. Twice. Caleb slipped and nearly fell. Both times, Ayanna caught him. Behind them, the shouting grew fainter. Slade's men were still searching the lower rocks, not yet realizing their quarry had gone up instead of down. The top of the ridge was flat and bare, exposed under the moonlight. They crossed it at a run, every second feeling like an hour. The far side dropped away into darkness. The trail starts there, Ayanna said, pointing to a gap in the rocks below. It's steep, but passable. They started down. Caleb's legs were failing. Each step sent pain shooting through his knee, his hips, his spine. He was 47 years old. He had ridden hard, walked harder, and gone without sleep for 2 days. His body was done, but his mind kept pushing. The trail wound down through the rocks, switching back on itself, dropping into a narrow canyon. The walls rose on either side, blocking the moonlight. Caleb could barely see his own feet. Ayanna moved ahead, her steps sure and confident in the darkness. How much farther? He gasped. Half a mile, maybe. She stopped. Caleb nearly ran into her. What is it? Listen. He listened. Hoofbeats coming from below. They circled around. Ayanna whispered, Cut us off. The canyon walls boxed them in. No way forward, no way back. Slade's men above them, Slade himself below, trapped. Caleb leaned against the rock wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His legs trembled beneath him. Give me the rifle, Ayanna said. It's empty. I know. She took it from him anyway, held it across her chest like a shield. Caleb, yes, thank you for coming for me, for not giving up. I made a promise. To who? Caleb thought about Margaret, about the dream in the line shack, her face floating up from the darkness, telling him to get up. To someone I loved. A long time ago. Ayanna reached out and touched his face, her fingers cool against his stubbled cheek. Then let me make you a promise too. What promise? Whatever happens next, I won't let him take me. Not alive. Not anymore. The hoofbeats grew louder, echoing off the canyon walls. Caleb straightened up, pushed off from the wall. It won't come to that. How do you know? Because I'm not done yet. He stepped past her and walked down the trail. The canyon opened into a small clearing. Slade sat on his horse at the far end, a kerosene lantern held high, casting flickering shadows across the rocks. Behind him, his men emerged from the lower trail. 4 of them, all armed. Slade's eyes found Caleb in the darkness. The night returns. His voice echoed off the canyon walls, smooth and pleasant, like they were discussing the weather. I must say, I'm impressed. I thought we left you tied up rather thoroughly. Takes more than rope to keep me down. Apparently, Slade dismounted, handing the lantern to one of his men. But now what? You have no weapon. You're outnumbered 5-1. And Miss Ayanna, he peered past Caleb into the shadows, is running out of places to hide. Caleb did not move. Let her go, Slade laughed. A soft, cultured sound that did not belong in this dusty canyon. Let her go. After all this trouble, after she made me look like a fool in front of half of Tucson. He shook his head slowly. No, I don't think so. I think I'll take her back and make an example of her. Show everyone what happens to property that forgets its place. She's not property. The law says otherwise. And then the law is wrong. Slade's smile faded, his eyes going cold and flat. You know what? I've had enough of this. Kill him. The men raised their weapons. And then one of them shot. He was young, younger than the others, maybe 20 years old. His rifle was pointed at Caleb's chest, but his hands were shaking. Mr. Slade, he said, maybe we should just... I said, kill him. The young man's face went pale in the lamplight. He's unarmed, sir. It don't feel right. It doesn't have to feel right. It just has to be done. The rifle wavered in the young man's hands. I signed on to track and retrieve, not to murder a man in cold blood. Slade's face twisted with anger. Then step aside and let someone else do it. The young man lowered his rifle. No, sir. I don't reckon I will. Silence fell over the canyon. The other men exchanged glances, shifting their weight. Uncertain. Jennings, Slade said, his voice quiet and dangerous. If you don't raise that rifle in the next 5 seconds, you're finished. You'll never work in this territory again. Then I guess I'm finished. Jennings walked past Slade, past the other men, and stopped beside Caleb. This ain't what I signed up for, he said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. Hunting a woman like she's some kind of animal, leaving a man to die in the desert, that ain't right, and I won't be part of it. Slade's jaw tightened until the muscles stood out. Anyone else feeling righteous tonight? The man with the shotgun lowered it slowly. He's got a point, Mr. Slade. This has gone too far. You're all cowards. Every last one of you? Maybe so. The shotgun man shrugged his heavy shoulders. But I'd rather be a coward than a murderer. He turned and walked away into the darkness. The third man followed, leading his horse. Only the fourth remained, the one with the dead eyes who had tied Caleb to the boulder. He looked at Slade, waiting for orders. Mr. Slade. Slade's face was twisted with rage, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Fine. I'll do it myself. He pulled a pistol from his coat. Wait. Ayanna stepped out of the shadows behind Caleb. She walked past him, past Jennings, and stopped 3 feet from Slade, close enough to touch. You want the letters, the real ones. Slade's hand tightened on the pistol, his knuckles going white. I already have the letters. No, you have copies, forgeries I made myself. Ayanna reached into her bodice and pulled out a sheaf of papers. Holding them up in the lamplight, these are the originals, signed by the senator, dated. Everything you need to destroy both of you. Slade's eyes locked on the papers, hunger and fury warring in his face. Give them to me. On one condition. You're not in a position to make conditions. Let him go. Let us both go. Walk away and never come back. Come. And these letters will never see the light of day. Slade's finger tightened on the trigger. Then slowly, he lowered the pistol. You're bluffing. Try me. The silence stretched out, thick and heavy as the darkness. Slade looked at the papers, at Ayanna, at Caleb, at the three men who had already walked away into the night, at the fourth, watching with uncertainty in his cold eyes. Fine, he said finally, the word coming out like he was spitting poison. Keep your letters. Keep your old man. I'm done with both of you. He mounted his horse. But if I ever see either of you again, you won't. Ayanna said, I promise. Slade rode out of the canyon without another word, his remaining man following close behind. The hoofbeats faded into the distance. The canyon went quiet. Caleb's legs gave out. He hit the ground hard, the impact jarring through his bones. Ayanna was beside him in an instant, her arms around him, holding him up. It's over, she whispered. It's over. Caleb looked up at the sky. The stars were fading. Dawn was coming, painting the eastern horizon gray and pink. The letters, he said. Were they really the originals? Ayanna smiled, that rare smile that changed her whole face. Does it matter? Jennings stood nearby, his rifle still lowered, his young face uncertain in the growing light. Ma'am, he said. Sir? There's a mission about 2 miles south. Father Esteban runs it. He'll take you in. No questions asked. Caleb looked at the young man. Why did you do it? Why did you stop? Jennings was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on something far away. My mother was Navajo, he said finally. She was sold once too, a long time ago, before I was born. He shrugged, a small, tired movement. I reckon some debts can never be fully paid, but you can try to balance the scales. He turned and walked into the darkness. Following the others, Ayanna helped Caleb to his feet. Can you walk? I can try. And they started south, toward the mission, toward Father Esteban, toward whatever came next. The sun rose behind them, painting the desert gold and red. And somewhere in that light, Caleb felt something he had not felt in 11 years. He felt like he might actually make it to tomorrow. The mission bells were ringing when they reached the gates. The sound drifted across the desert, clear and sweet, calling the faithful to morning prayer. Caleb stopped at the adobe wall and leaned against it, his legs trembling beneath him. The plaster was cool against his palm, rough where the weather had worn it away. Father Esteban stood in the doorway of the chapel, his brown Franciscan robe catching the early light. He was older than Caleb remembered, his hair gone white, his face creased with the years, but his eyes were the same sharp and kind, missing nothing. Caleb Wright, the priest said, his voice carrying across the courtyard. It has been many years, 15, give or take. Father Esteban's gaze moved to Ayanna, to the rope burns on her wrists, to the blood dried on her face, to the exhaustion written in every line of her body. "Come inside," he said. "Both of you." The mission was small. A chapel with a dirt floor and wooden benches, worn smooth by generations of worshippers. A rectory with thick adobe walls that kept the heat out. A garden where an old woman in a black shawl was pulling weeds, her movements slow and careful. Father Esteban led them to a room with 2 cots and a wooden table. A crucifix hung on the whitewashed wall. A single candle burned in a clay dish, its flame steady and small. "Rest," the priest said. "I will bring food and water. We can talk when you are ready." He closed the door behind him. Caleb sat down on the cot. The rope frame creaked beneath his weight. His legs were shaking. His wrists throbbed. Every muscle in his body screamed for sleep, but he could not close his eyes. Not yet. Ayanna sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap. The morning light fell through the small window, catching the dust motes floating in the air. "The letters," Caleb said. "You never answered my question. Were they the real ones?" Ayanna reached into her bodice and pulled out the sheaf of papers. She spread them on the table between them, the pages rustling softly. "These are real. The senator's handwriting, dates, names, amounts, enough to put Slade in prison for 20 years. And the ones you gave him at the line shack, copies. Good copies. But copies." She gathered the papers and tucked them back into hiding. "I made them the second night after I escaped, just in case. You planned for this, all of it. I planned to survive." She looked at him, her dark eyes steady. "The rest just happened." Father Esteban returned with a tray. Fresh bread, still warm from the oven, the crust golden brown, and a round of white cheese, dried figs in a clay bowl, a pitcher of water, and 2 cups. "Eat," the priest said. "Drink. You both look like you have walked through the valley of the shadow." Caleb ate. The bread was soft and yeasty, the cheese sharp and salty on his tongue. He drank 2 cups of water without stopping, the coolness of it spreading through his chest. Ayanna ate more slowly, her eyes on the priest. "Father," she said, "we need your help. I assumed as much. What kind of help?" Caleb set down his cup. "We need to get married." Father Esteban's eyebrows rose toward his white hair. "Married? Today? Now? As soon as possible." The priest looked from Caleb to Ayanna and back again, his weathered face thoughtful. "This is rather sudden." "There's a man," Ayanna said, "a traitor named Slade. He has papers that say he owns me, bought me from the reservation like livestock. The only way to void those papers is if I'm already married to someone else." Father Esteban was quiet for a long moment. The candle flickered on the table outside. The bells had stopped ringing, and the mission was quiet, except for the distant sound of the old woman working in the garden. "I remember when I married you and Margaret," the priest said to Caleb. "You were young then, full of hope. She was beautiful. She was. Do you love this woman?" Caleb looked at Ayanna. I don't know what I feel. It's too soon for words like love, but I know I'm not willing to let her go. I know I'll stand with her against whatever comes. I know that when I'm with her, I feel like I have a reason to wake up in the morning. And you, Father Esteban turned to Ayanna. What do you feel? Ayanna's hands twisted in her lap. I feel safe with him. I feel seen for the first time in years. I feel like I might have a future instead of just a past I'm running from. The priest nodded slowly. That is not love. Not yet. But it is the soil where love can take root. He reached into his robe and pulled out a small leather-bound book. I will marry you, but I want you both to understand something. What? Marriage is not a contract. It is not a piece of paper that protects you from the law. It is a covenant, a promise made before the Lord. If you make this promise, you must mean it, not just for today, but for all the days that follow. Caleb looked at Ayanna. She looked back at him. I understand. Caleb said, So do I. Ayanna said, Father Esteban opened his book. Then let us begin. The ceremony was simple. They stood in the small chapel, the morning light streaming through the single window and falling in a golden rectangle on the dirt floor. The old woman from the garden stood as witness, her weathered hands clasped before her, her black shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. Father Esteban spoke the words in his quiet, steady voice. The old words, the words that had joined Caleb to Margaret in this same chapel 15 years ago. Do you, Caleb Wright, take this woman to be your wife, to have and to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part, I do. And do you, Ayanna, take this man to be your husband, to have and to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part. Ayanna's voice was steady. I do. Father Esteban made the sign of the cross over them, his hand moving slowly through the dusty air. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. What the Lord has joined together, let no man put asunder. He produced a marriage certificate from his book, filled in the names, the date, the location, signed it with a careful hand, and sprinkled sand on the ink to dry it. This is your protection, he said, handing it to Caleb. Guard it well. Caleb folded the paper and tucked it into his jacket, next to his heart. They left the chapel and walked out into the garden. The sun was high now, the morning cool giving way to midday warmth. Somewhere beyond the mission walls, a hawk circled overhead, riding the rising air. The old woman had gone back to her weeds, her bent figure moving slowly among the rows of beans and squash. Ayanna stopped beside a small fountain made of stacked stones. Water trickled from a clay pipe into a basin worn smooth by years of use. She cupped her hands and drank. So, she said, we're married. We are. How does it feel? Caleb thought about it. About the weight of the certificate against his chest. About the words he had spoken in the chapel. About the woman standing beside him who was now, in the eyes of the law and the church, his wife, Strange, Vixie, he said. Good, strange. Like putting on a coat you forgot you owned. Ayanna smiled. It was only the third time he had seen her smile, and it still changed her whole face, softening the hard edges, filling the shadows with light. What happens now? She asked. Now we go home. Your cabin, our cabin. If you want it. Ayanna looked at him for a long time, her dark eyes searching his face. When I was a girl, my mother used to tell me stories about the old days, before the soldiers came, before the reservations. She said our people believed that every person has a path laid out for them before they are born, and that sometimes two paths cross, and when they do, if both people are brave enough, they can walk the same trail together. Do you believe that? I didn't. For a long time, I believed there was only survival, only running, only staying one step ahead of the people who wanted to hurt me. She reached out and took his hand. But then I found your cabin, and you gave me water when you could have turned me away, and you offered me shelter when you had every reason not to, and you came for me when any sensible man would have stayed behind. Her fingers tightened around his. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe there is such a thing as paths crossing. Maybe I was always meant to find you. Caleb looked at their joined hands, at the rope burns on her wrists that were already starting to heal, at the scars on his own hands, earned over 47 years of hard living. I'm too old to start over, he said. That's what I kept telling myself. Too old, too tired, too worn out to try again. And now I think I was just too scared to try. Ayanna stepped closer. Shi banjo, she said softly. Caleb remembered the words from that night on the ridge, when she had put her hand over his heart. I am here for you, he said. Yes. Not I love you, not I will stay forever. Something simpler than that. Something more honest. The promise to show up, to be present, to stand beside someone day after day. Not because you had to, but because you chose to. Caleb covered her hand with his own. Ayanna, yes. That first night, when you showed up at my fence line, did you know? Did you have any idea it would end up like this? She shook her head. I was just looking for water. And maybe a place to rest for one night. One night, he smiled. That's what I said. That's what you said. They stood there in the garden, the fountain trickling beside them, the sun warm on their faces. Two people who had lost everything. Two people who had found each other. Caleb looked at the trail leading out of the mission, winding north through the desert toward the canyon, toward the cabin he had built 15 years ago for a woman who was gone. Ready to go home? He asked. Ayanna smiled. Ready? They walked out of the garden, through the mission gates, and onto the trail. The desert stretched before them, red and gold and endless under the October sky. The hawks circled overhead, riding the warm air. The wind carried the smell of sage and creosote and the faint sweetness of the last desert flowers before winter. Caleb did not look back. For the first time in 11 years, he did not need to. The cabin was waiting, the two chairs on the porch, The table that would need two plates now instead of one. The bed that had been empty for too long. A new life. A second chance. He had not believed in those anymore. But walking beside Ayanna, her hand in his, the marriage certificate folded against his heart, Caleb felt something he had not felt in years. Not happiness. It was too soon for that. Not love that would come later, if it came at all. Just the quiet certainty that tomorrow would come. And when it did, he would face it with someone beside him. They walked north as the sun crossed the sky. The shadows grew longer. The air grew cooler. The first stars began to appear in the east, faint pinpricks of light against the fading blue. And somewhere ahead, still miles away, but getting closer with every step. The cabin waited in its canyon, silent and patient, ready to welcome them home. Caleb squeezed Ayanna's hand. She squeezed back. They kept walking. There is something tender about sitting with a story like this one. The kind that leaves a quiet weight in the chest. The kind that does not ask to be explained or understood, only to be felt and carried for a while. Many of us have known what it means to close a door and call it peace. To tell ourselves we are fine with the silence because the silence cannot hurt us the way people can. Some of us have carried that story for years. Decades even, without ever speaking it aloud to anyone. And perhaps you have known what it is to meet someone who did not ask you to be different, who simply stayed, who showed up day after day, not because they had to, but because they chose to. It is all right if this story stirred something you thought you had put away a long time ago. It is all right if you are not sure what to do with what you are feeling right now. Some things are not meant to be resolved or figured out. They are only meant to be acknowledged. The way you nod to an old friend passing on the street. You do not have to carry any of it alone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening all the way through.